Hey guys, Chris of the Polish Geek, and welcome to the movie review of From the World of John Wick, Ballerina. And I have to say, the movie was great. It was so entertaining, I had such a good time with it, but we'll get to it soon enough. First I have to say, the studio is so foolish that they're straight up restricting the critics and not letting them say anything bad about the movie, because they're basically completely shooting themselves right in the head with that. Because, again, it's a really entertaining, fun movie with lots of spectacular action and completely free of any political messaging. And it very much feels like a movie set in John Wick universe. I'll get to it all soon enough, but first I have to say, by basically completely restricting the critics from giving their honest opinion on the movie, it's basically like it seems like they almost have zero confidence in this movie and they consider it bad, which is a real shame, and as a result this movie might flop, even though I feel it completely doesn't deserve it. First I will say that John Wick franchise is one of those franchises I've been very late to. I've only binge watched all three of them right when John Wick Chapter 4 was coming out, and I had a really great time with all of them. My favorite John Wick movie by far is still John Wick Chapter 4, no question about that. It was such a perfect set of the character, and I'm so against the fifth movie. I mean, they already announced the fifth movie, and it's gonna be a sequel to Chapter 4, so it's a real shame, because again, Chapter 4 was such a perfect send-off and perfect ending for the character that I really don't think there is any need to making any more of those movies in the franchise. Unless more spin-offs, I guess, but even with that they don't need to go overboard with, but that's what happens, man. Still, where does Ballerina fall into the John Wick movies? Well, my favorite John Wick movie by far is still John Wick Chapter 4, easily, followed closely by the very original John Wick, but I actually think I'll put Ballerina somewhere right there, on a third place, above John Wick 2 and John Wick 3, but below John Wick 4 and the original one. Yep, that's where I'll put the Ballerina with, but still, I really had such a fun and entertaining time with the movie, because the first thing we have to get out of the way, and the first thing we gotta talk about, and that's perhaps what most people are very concerned about this movie anyway, is Eve, the titular ballerina. Is she an annoying girl boss marries you? And to that the answer is easy no, absolutely not. First, she's actually a quite likable character, and I was so invested in her story, and also when I said she's not a Mary Sue, because even in the very beginning, it's actually made clear to her that a lot of her opponents are actually gonna be much stronger than her, which is natural considering that she's a female, so her body is kind of biologically structured differently, that most of her enemies are naturally gonna be stronger than her, but that doesn't mean that they will always have an advantage, and sometimes it's all about using all the environments and the resources you have, and the movie very much goes into that, and as a result she fights very different from John Wick, and I love that, because she's not basically a John Wick replacement, no, but her own individual character within the John Wick universe, and John Wick does show up, we'll get to it soon enough, but this is very much Eve's story, and I really love it. When she fights, she often uses weapons, and whatever resources the environment that she fights in very much gives her, and I think that it was a very smart move, and as I said, John Wick does show up in the movie, and his appearance is so welcome. He appears in the very beginning of the movie where he kind of makes a cameo and then shows up once again at the end during the final battle, and I think that his appearance was so welcome and made so much sense in the context of the story. I really love that, and what's most important, that they very much respected his character, which I'm pretty sure what most John Wick fans are very concerned about. I will tell you. The story very much respects his character and clearly understands why everyone loves John Wick, which, good job, something that most of Hollywood fails nowadays at. And the most important thing though we do gotta talk about, I mean come on, that's what most people go see John Wick movies for anyway, but is the action, which I think is just spectacular. Like, this is very much a recognizably a John Wick movie, but as I said, because Eve, the ballerina, is her own character with her own skills, very different from John Wick, she fights quite differently from John Wick, but I love it. Like, there's so many awesome spectacular action scenes, like plenty of gun shoots, like in John Wick fashion, but as I said, whenever Ballerina fist fights, she doesn't generally fist fight, more like uses weapons generally, which makes perfect sense in context. And there is also some fire shooting, actually. Yep, the action is really spectacular and really entertaining. And let's face it, guys, the action is what most people go see John Wick movies anyway. So when it comes to the action, this movie excels at spectacular action scenes. And the final thing I want to talk about, though, is the story. And the story, lots of people say, is generic, because the story is that Eve's father gets murdered while she was a kid, and then she gets like integrated into this Russia-Roma society to train to be an assassin and take revenge on the people who killed her father, and then lots of ass kicking. Yep. Pretty generic story, but let's face it, John Wick movies never particularly excelled at compelling storytelling, but to make a generic cliché story compelling is make characters very likable. And as I said, I personally found Eve, the ballerina, a very likable and compelling character. As I said already in the beginning, she's not an annoying girl boss marries you. Not only I was very much invested in her story arc, but she's actually vulnerable. She gets injured, and actually during the final battle, I was very much worried about her character, what happens to her, in contrast to lots of Hollywood movies which basically just like kill enemies without even getting remotely injured, but that's very much not the case with Eve, the ballerina, and you do very much worry what will happen to her at the end during the final battle. But overall, I had a really great time with the ballerina from the world of John Wick, and overall I think it's a very worthy addition to the John Wick franchise. Like, it's a really great spin-off, and if I ever do a John Wick marathon, I will be more than glad to include it in my John Wick marathon. Like, I will probably be watching it after John Wick 3, because that's when I think the story technically takes place. But again, Ballerina from the world of John Wick, I think, is a really spectacular action movie and a very worthy addition to the franchise of John Wick. And it's a real shame that the studios clearly have no confidence in this movie and started intimidating the critics into giving the movie a positive review, because they're truly gonna shoot themselves in the head with this one, which is sad, because it's a really great action movie. And overall, thank you guys for checking out this movie review. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you later in another video. Talk to you later, bye!